saw him as a gangster, no.
You saw him as?
I saw him as someone who inherited this thing. You start to find it's dubious because you don't know whether somebody wants you because they see you in the part.
In this video, we explore 7 actors Al Pacino allegedly hated working with. From early simmering conflicts to long, icy silences, these clashes not only rocked film projects but also left lasting marks on reputations and careers. Did Pacino really hate sharing the screen with Marlon Brando? What happened between Pacino and Jared Leto that caused a stir on the set of The House of Gucci? Watch as we reveal the 7 names that made the list and the moments that pushed one of cinema's greatest actors to his limits. Number 1. Marlon Brando. Few films in history carry the weight of The Godfather. Fewer still assembled a cast as legendary. Yet behind the smoke-filled rooms and the iconic dialogue, there was another drama unfolding, one not written by Mario Puzo, but born out of ego, pride, and the fragile balance of respect between giants. Al Pacino, then a young actor burning with raw intensity, had just landed the role of Michael Corleone, a part that would define his career. Opposite him stood Marlon Brando, already a myth, the reigning master of method acting, returning from creative exile to embody Don Vito Corleone. On screen, they were father and son. Off screen, their bond was far frostier, more like distant rivals than family. It began quietly. Brando's sheer presence dominated every set he walked onto, casting a shadow so large that even Francis Ford Coppola sometimes struggled to rein him in. Insiders claim Brando often improvised or shifted the rhythm of scenes without warning, a chaotic approach that clashed with Pacino's precise, disciplined style. For the young actor still proving himself, every unscripted twist felt like a test, and a reminder of the power imbalance he was up against. Marlon would just do things, Pacino once admitted in an early interview. He wouldn't always tell you what. You had to react or drown. For a young actor still trying to prove himself, that unpredictability felt less like genius and more like sabotage. But the quiet tension finally burst into the open at the 1973 Academy Awards. When the nominations were announced, Brando's name appeared under Best Leading Actor. Pacino? Best Supporting Actor, despite having more screen time, carrying the emotional weight of Michael Corleone's transformation and arguably being the film's center of gravity. To Pacino, it felt like being erased from his own story. He boycotted the ceremony altogether. He was furious with Brando, a publicist close to the production recalled. He felt robbed. Not by the Academy, but by the narrative that it was Brando who carried the film. And that wasn't his truth. Brando, as always, sidestepped the drama. He never addressed Pacino directly. Instead, he made history by sending Sachin Littlefeather to decline his Oscar in protest of Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans, a move that overshadowed all other controversies of the night. If Brando noticed Pacino's absence, he never mentioned it. If he cared, he never showed it. Years later, Pacino tried to dismiss the rumors. "How does a story like that get out?" he told The Hollywood Reporter. "I wasn't upset. Are you kidding me? I didn't go to the Oscars, but not because of that." And yet, the silence between the two men told a different story. They never truly crossed paths again. Their only reunion came nearly 2 decades later, in The Godfather Part 3, but only through old archive footage of Brando. In real life, there were no shared projects, no awards show embraces, not even a staged photo. One director who worked with both actors summed it up best: Marlon was chaos. Al was control. It wasn't a feud of shouting matches. It was a clash of temperatures. And yet, for all the distance between them, Pacino never dismissed Brando's genius. "He was like a magician," Pacino once said. "You never knew where the trick came from, but it worked." The admiration was sincere, but so was the wound. What lingered between them wasn't open conflict, but something quieter and perhaps harder to heal, a missed connection between two masters of the same craft, separated not by talent but by temperament. Now, with Brando gone and Pacino at 85, the tension has long since faded into history. Not resolved, just retired. Like Michael and Vito, they were forever bound by legacy, but unlike their characters, they never found peace at the end of their story. Number 2, Leonardo DiCaprio. Pacino isn't the kind of actor who needs to raise his voice to prove a point. He trusts silence, instinct, and the raw moment in front of him. For decades, that approach has carried him through Shakespeare, courtroom battles, mafia dynasties, and fiery monologues. His philosophy has always been simple: feel it now, don't rehearse it to death. So when Leonardo DiCaprio arrived on the set of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, armed with annotated scripts, historical research, and even a personal team of consultants, Pacino didn't see preparation. He saw interruption. Though the two men never shared a scene, their methods clashed loudly in the atmosphere of the set. Crew members described it as a quiet divide. Pacino thrived on spontaneity, conjuring sparks in the moment. DiCaprio, by contrast, built his performance brick by brick, like a cathedral of precision. First assistant director William Paul Clark recalled it vividly. Leo would show up hours early, breaking down late 60s politics with historians he hired. Al would walk in, glance at the sides, and just live it. The tension reached a peak during a table read, when DiCaprio launched into a lengthy analysis of Hollywood's power shifts after the Paramount decree, citing guild conflicts from 1968. For Pacino, it wasn't art anymore. It was homework. Pacino leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and let out a line that cut through the room. "The research department is down the hall. We're in the acting department here." The comment drew a laugh, but it also drew a line in the sand. From that moment on, the air was colder. Insiders say Pacino later vented to Martin Scorsese about his frustrations. "He's got the head of an academic," Pacino allegedly said of DiCaprio. "But sometimes you have to set fire to the textbook and see what's left." The difference in their approaches was striking. Costume designer Arianne Phillips recalled how DiCaprio requested endless fittings, needing to feel every detail before stepping into character. Pacino, by contrast, would slip on a coat, close his eyes for a few seconds, and declare, "This is it." No debate. Just instinct. For DiCaprio, the dismissals cut deeper than craft. Privately, he confided to a friend, "He was my hero growing up. I studied him scene by scene. And now he treats me like I'm wasting time." The heartbreak wasn't just professional, it was personal. To be brushed off by a legend he idolized felt like betrayal. "Maybe I overprepare," DiCaprio admitted. "Maybe I kill the magic by overthinking. But I don't know how else to do it." Pacino had seen this before. Years earlier, he clashed with Tom Cruise during Collateral rehearsals, telling him, "All this homework is wonderful, but at some point, you've got to set fire to the library and see what happens." To Pacino, acting was jazz. To DiCaprio, it was architecture. And that divide defined their uneasy dynamic. But time has a way of softening edges. In late 2024, the two were spotted at the Bird Street Club in Los Angeles, joined by DiCaprio's father, George. No cameras, no red carpet, just three men sharing cigarettes, memories, and laughter. Witnesses say Leo helped Pacino into his car, clapped him on the back, and called him a expletive king. Pacino smiled and replied, "You turned out all right, kid." It didn't erase the past, but it reframed it. Today, they're not friends, not exactly allies, but something quieter, two artists bound by mutual respect, even if their philosophies will never meet. Fire and blueprint. Improvisation and calculation. Pacino never truly hated Leonardo DiCaprio. What unsettled him was simpler, and perhaps harder to face. He just didn't see himself in him. But time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges of legacy. Not every feud ends in fireworks. Sometimes it dissolves over a long lunch, a laugh, and an unspoken choice to let it rest. Number 3. Tom Cruise. Al Pacino never built his career on polish or perfection. His craft was instinct, surrendering to the raw, unpredictable energy of a moment. Acting, to him, wasn't control. It was chaos, beautifully harnessed. So when he collided with Tom Cruise, Hollywood's champion of precision, on Michael Mann's Collateral, the tension was inevitable. From the first workshop, the clash was clear. Cruise arrived armed with research, dossiers on contract killers, detailed backstories, weeks of firearms training. Directors adored that level of commitment. But Pacino wasn't charmed. After sitting through one of Cruise's meticulous character breakdowns, he finally cut in, "I don't need to know where he went to elementary school. I need to know what he's feeling right now." It wasn't just a critique. It was a shot across the bow. What followed was less an argument than an artistic standoff. Pacino tossed aside the script during rehearsals, hoping to provoke something raw. Cruise held his ground, sticking to the beats he had drilled. Between takes, Pacino leaned in and muttered, "All this homework is wonderful. But at some point, you've got to set fire to the library and see what happens." That line echoed through the crew, crystallizing the gulf between them. Cruise was choreography. Pacino was jazz. One mapped every gesture like a stunt. The other let instinct carry him, messy but alive. Production designer Janine Opwall remembered the contrast. With Cruise, every movement was engineered. With Pacino, you never knew what would happen. But whatever it was, it felt real. Director Michael Mann tried to bridge the gap, but the chemistry never clicked. Eventually, he made the bold pivot, casting Cruise as the assassin and handing the cab driver role to Jamie Foxx, whose flexibility fit the vision. The gamble paid off. Cruise delivered one of his most acclaimed performances. Foxx walked away with an Oscar nomination. And Pacino? He walked away entirely. Years later, at the Venice Film Festival, Pacino was asked if he regretted leaving. His answer was pure Pacino: "There are actors who design beautiful houses. I prefer the ones who live in them, even if the furniture gets broken sometimes." Cruise, characteristically, never addressed it. By 2006, Pacino gave a rare reflection in Entertainment Weekly. Asked about working alongside other emotionally raw actors, he offered a careful acknowledgement: "You have to respect everyone's process, even when it doesn't align. Sometimes it just doesn't fit." There had been no public explosions, no screaming headlines, just two towering artists who could never quite see the craft through the same lens. Since then, their paths have barely crossed. No collaborations, no joint panels, no glowing mentions in interviews. It isn't hostility, it's distance. In Hollywood, the loudest conflicts aren't always in front of the cameras. Sometimes they happen quietly, in rehearsal rooms, where two unshakable philosophies collide. And Pacino never looked back. Number 4. Kevin Spacey. For Pacino, Acting has always been about surrendering to raw truth, unpredictable, spontaneous, alive. Kevin Spacey, by contrast, built his reputation on precision, dissecting a role with the cold calculation of a chess master. Their differences came to a head in 1992 on the set of Glengarry Glen Ross, a pressure cooker production that exposed not just clashing methods, but an unspoken rivalry between two men who embodied opposite poles of the craft. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable, Spacey as the icy, manipulative office manager John Williamson, and Pacino as the volatile salesman Ricky Roma. Off-screen, however, the atmosphere was thick with friction. Spacey attacked each scene like a technician, breaking it down piece by piece, calibrating every pause and inflection. Pacino hated it. Director James Foley later recalled, Al felt Kevin's approach drained the life out of the work. For him, performance had to be lived, not diagrammed. The breaking point came during the film's climactic confrontation. Spacey had just delivered a perfectly measured take, flawless, but bloodless. Foley called cut, and Pacino, still burning, pulled him aside within earshot of the crew. His words cut like glass, he's not acting. He's demonstrating acting. The silence that followed was suffocating. Crew members later remembered Spacey's face, like he'd been slapped. Production designer Jane Muskie admitted Spacey's delivery was airtight, but too polished for Pacino's taste. Al doesn't just say lines. He erupts with them. Kevin was always too neat, too restrained. Script supervisor Diane Dreyer saw it too. Spacey's script was covered in markings for rhythm, pacing, intonation. To her, it was like watching an architect draft blueprints next to a man trying to paint lightning. Spacey, true to form, never addressed the jab publicly. But those close to him said he carried the sting privately, and his contempt for Pacino was no secret. One producer once recalled hearing someone say, Al thinks chaos is depth. But sometimes chaos is just chaos. Years later, during an actor's studio master class, when asked about working with Kevin Spacey, Pacino didn't name him directly but left a sharp hint: some actors perform, others reveal. The audience can always tell the difference. Everyone in the room knew exactly who he meant. There was no explosive fallout, no screaming headlines, just a quiet, decisive fracture. From that moment, Pacino and Spacey never worked together again, nor did they speak. Their rift wasn't personal in the usual sense, but professional, philosophical, even spiritual. Pacino, the instinctive storm; Spacey, the icy tactician. Both brilliant, yet utterly incompatible. Pacino has never publicly addressed Spacey's scandals, but in a 2019 roundtable, when asked who was the most difficult genius he had worked with, he simply smirked and said, "There are actors who never stop rehearsing, even when the cameras are rolling." For those who knew the history, no further explanation was needed. It was a wound that would never heal. In Pacino's world, where truth must be felt, not fabricated, there was no place for someone like Spacey. The fifth rift on that list was with Dustin Hoffman. To Pacino, acting was never a science but a storm, an instinctive plunge into the soul of a character. Hoffman, in contrast, treated the craft like a dissection table. Every role required weeks of research, psychological mapping, and intellectual breakdowns. When both were cast in Sidney Lumet's planned 1974 film Attica, what should have been a powerhouse pairing quickly collapsed. Lumet later explained, Dustin needed to understand every motivation, every psychological nuance. Al wanted to live inside the character's emotional reality without dissecting it. Tension surfaced immediately in rehearsals. Hoffman arrived with folders of data and endless lists of questions, while Pacino grew more silent until he finally snapped, "We're not performing autopsies here. We're trying to breathe life into something." Things only escalated. During an improvisation, Hoffman kept interrupting to analyze intent, prompting Pacino to throw up his hands. "At some point, you've got to stop building the violin and play the damn music." That was the breaking point. Lumet pulled the plug, convinced the project was doomed. Though the film never happened, the bad blood lingered. Throughout the 1970s, both men dominated Hollywood, often competing for the same roles and Oscars, with critics fueling a constant rivalry. Hoffman's cerebral intensity versus Pacino's fiery presence. Pacino despised the comparisons. In his memoir Sonny Boy, he wrote, "There must have been something in the air. Everyone kept pitting us against each other." The rivalry even reached absurd heights when Broadway mogul Alexander H. Cohen suggested staging a real boxing match between them at Madison Square Garden, whether for charity, spectacle, or both. Pacino recalled, "I said straight out, Dustin works out, he'll knock me out. Then I joked maybe Meryl Streep should fight me instead. But then I thought, what if she wins?" Hoffman never publicly fired back, but according to one producer, he privately dismissed Pacino's approach as reckless and indulgent. One crew member once recalled Dustin Hoffman grumbling, "Al jumps into the river without checking if there's water." To Hoffman, Pacino's approach was impulsive, unstructured, too dependent on mood rather than discipline. And so, over the years, the two men remained on separate paths, both brilliant, both respected, but never friends. They never shared a screen, never shared a stage, and certainly never exchanged compliments in public. If respect existed between them, it was long buried beneath decades of artistic mistrust. What remains is one of Hollywood's most enduring Cold Wars, not loud, not explosive, but permanently frozen. Two giants of the craft, two clashing philosophies, and one broken collaboration in 1974 that still casts its shadow. Even the greatest actors, it seems, can't always act like they get along. The sixth name on Pacino's unspoken list is Jared Leto. In 2021, the set of House of Gucci brought them together, two Oscar winners, two generations of acting royalty. On paper, it was a dream pairing. In reality, it was a slow-motion collision. Their feud, quiet but undeniable, wasn't driven by ego so much as ideology. Leto arrived fully submerged in character as Paolo Gucci, prosthetics, thinning hair, eccentric accent, the whole transformation. From his first exaggerated papa to Pacino, the air shifted. Pacino didn't even recognize him, one crew member remembered. He dismissed him as though he were just another overeager extra. Leto later joked that Pacino nearly had a heart attack when he realized who it was, but the humor fell flat. The tension lingered. According to production designer Arthur Max, Pacino's initial intrigue turned into disbelief as he watched Leto's elaborate rituals drag on day after day. First Assistant Director Giuseppe Bonifazi confirmed that in one particularly intense scene, Leto refused to drop character even after the camera stopped. In front of the entire crew, Pacino turned to Ridley Scott and said curtly, "Tell the kid the scene is over. He can come back now." It was more than annoyance. It was a rejection of Leto's very philosophy. For Pacino, raised in the classical tradition, Stanislavski fused with raw street instinct, acting is about peeling away artifice until something true breaks through. To him, Leto's relentless immersion wasn't collaboration, but performance art masquerading as craft. To Al Pacino, Jared Leto was never chasing truth, he was manufacturing it. Leto, in contrast, saw his process as sacred. "I didn't do a single rehearsal," he later admitted. "I love it to be a wreck." I know it drove Al crazy. Publicly, he spoke warmly of their partnership, calling Pacino a beautiful partner, so generous, no ego. But insiders told a different story. During the rollout of House of Gucci, Pacino reportedly asked to limit joint press appearances with Leto, and at premieres, the two men rarely interacted. Their clash was philosophical, Leto's ad-libs, prosthetics, and refusal to break character graded against Pacino's disciplined, scene-focused method. What Leto framed as devotion, Pacino perceived as chaos. One crew member recalled Leto shouting his signature boof during takes. It charmed some, the source said, but Al wasn't one of them. He doesn't like the circus. He likes the work. Neither actor ever openly criticized the other, but Pacino's comments behind closed doors left little doubt. And while Leto remained diplomatic, the absence of future collaboration spoke volumes. The feud never exploded, but it never healed either. Hollywood insiders say there may be a quiet respect between them, though affection seems unlikely. The next fracture came with Johnny Depp. In 1997, when Donnie Brasco premiered, audiences were captivated by the on-screen chemistry between Pacino and Depp, a slow-burning dance of loyalty, betrayal, and tragedy. But behind the camera, the harmony faltered. What looked like mutual respect on screen masked a fundamental clash of philosophies. Pacino approached his role as Lefty with visceral, almost spiritual immersion. He didn't play the character, he became him. Depp, at the height of his chameleon era, worked from the outside in, crafting Donnie through quirks, accents, and physical detail. Director Mike Newell later explained, Al needed everything to emerge from an emotional core. Johnny built Donnie from external detail. That divide quickly became friction. During a pivotal restaurant scene in Brooklyn, production designer Donald Graham Burt recalled Pacino abruptly turning to Depp mid-take, "Where are you right now?" "Because you're not here with me." The set fell silent. For Pacino, who thrived on emotional connection, Depp's detachment felt unacceptable. Tensions grew so sharp that producer Barry Levinson had to intervene multiple times. Later, at the actor's studio, Pacino offered a telling reflection: some actors create characters. Others reveal themselves through characters. The problem comes when those two types try to inhabit the same reality. He didn't name Depp, he didn't need to. Years later, Depp broke the silence at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. Half in awe, half in jest, he described Pacino as certifiably insane. On set, he even said it to Pacino's face. The veteran actor, ever the master of timing, shot back, "Oh yeah? You didn't know that?" After a pause, he added dryly, "You're pretty ***ing strange yourself." It was perhaps their only moment of truce, bonded not by respect, but by mutual eccentricity. So, was it hatred? Not in the tabloid sense. But it was tension, philosophical, creative, personal, the kind that lingers long after filming ends. To this day, Pacino and Depp have never reunited on screen. No sequels, no nostalgia tours, just silence. And in Hollywood, silence speaks loudest. Al Pacino's conflicts with these actors were never about ego. They were about something deeper, the clash between technical craft and emotional truth. For Pacino, great acting isn't about polish or perfection, it's about stripping everything down until only raw honesty remains. He never doubted their talent. He doubted their approach. And in those differences, sparks flew, leaving behind some of the most fascinating quiet feuds in Hollywood history.